So I
How
did,
about me?
and Gregg has been incredible to work with as the interviewer, but we did a long interview around KBDI, which was a pretty significant part of my career in the first part. And so we're preparing to do the next one, which will be on Penn State, and then the third interview will be on the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And they're very, very different. And so what I'm trying to do is to get a sense of, remembering back. My memory is not always the greatest, and I don't have material that I had at Penn State when my wife was overseeing public information. So you're going to help me, and each of you have really, I think, good stories about what brought you to connect with Penn State, how you got there. And I think that's what David is referring to at the origin stories. So who would like to kick it off between the three of you? Trying to think who would have been first. Susan, you might have been the first since we were neighbors, but I think
Yeah. And let me just see if I get a grasp of this. So the goal is to talk about or to help you recreate your time at Penn State and what you did and what we all did together in terms of public service media and the research university, that sort of thing.
yeah, yes. I mean, I'm
Okay.
less with KBDI had like a timeline and a lot of different things, and we had a lot of press and things that helped me kind of put that together. And I think of Penn State more as kind of, less like this happened on this day or time, and a little more like some of the initiatives. And each of you
Right.
were very involved in some what I consider to be significant initiatives. So
Okay.
with
Yeah,
that
that's
in
helpful.
mind, yeah.
Okay. Well, Ted, I remember sitting out together on our deck. I don't know if you remember this. And we were talking about how it seems so important to bring the radio television station into the university research mission. And, my back history, I have radio people in my family. My brother was a DJ, is still a sort of DJ for, I guess it's Koto and Telluride. My sister was with KDNK. And my whole family listens to National Public Radio, and, we're just PBS, and we were, as I think it became clear, I was much more radio focused than TV focused. And you kept saying, WPSU TV, FM, and it was like, I didn't even hear the TV. But anyway, so we started, I don't remember how we got onto it, but we started talking about how, and also I had edited a book for Duke on radio, called Radio Century Radio Culture, that was about the birth, it was an edited collection on the functions of radio all across the world, radio in Australia, so I was really interested in that. And the two of us just started, I think, brainstorming about wouldn't it be cool to do something. And I'm not sure, I will say, full disclosure, I looked for my files. When I left my office, those files didn't come with me. So I have nothing other than what's in my head. And they're kind of little vignettes, us having that conversation. A bunch of us later driving to the conference at Ohio State, which was what was it? It was the outreach conference, maybe. And Melanie, you were in the car, maybe you were even driving, I can't remember. And we gave a paper together, and we had fellows through the Science, Technology, and Society program, which existed for a while and then was killed. And what?
I was in the meeting with you and your then dean. I forget her name.
Yes.
I think it was the first time I saw you, maybe a little bit in tears.
Oh, I think I was in tears. Susan Welsh, yes. Oh, she killed the program. Yes, well, it was such a good program. Oh my God. And we had fellows for WPSU TV, FM, Public Service Media, and the Research University. And some of them have gone on from strength to strength, most particularly Gregg Schnirring. You remember Gregg? He was so good on the TV. He has a book coming out now with Oxford that's called When the Flying Saucers Came, and he was the Lindbergh Fellow at the Smithsonian. What a title, Lindbergh Fellow, and now he's going to be at Princeton in the Davis Center. So his work in that area, I think he may have talked about a bit. I'm rambling, but I'm just going from association to association. There were terrific people in that group. Yeah.
Well, I want to come back to it, but maybe just to go, and I'm going across the screen. So Nate, and you may need to leave a little bit early. So I want to make sure we get your story as well.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry, I didn't realize at first it was going to be 2 hours, so I booked something at 11:15 that I can't change. But I will share as much as I can while you have me. Yeah. So how did I first come to it? Well, Penn State Public Broadcasting was my first real job, honestly. So it was right out of I came to it through a former producer who was my film professor at Penn State. When I was taking some courses there, and I was teaching at the local Friends School. This was right after graduating from college. Yeah. And I was taking a film course with Chuck Unger, who was a longtime producer. And he, I was kind of his star student in the class. I was a little older than everybody, and I was very passionate about it. And he said, well, maybe I could help you get an entry-level job kind of thing. So I first worked on the camera crew, and actually was a very challenging to shoot scholastic scrimmage. The quiz, it was, you had to like zoom in really quick, like the kid doesn't know what the answer is. It's like zoom in on his face, and I would like mess it up, and they would be in the control room like, Nate, what are you doing? It was like, and I was like, and really what my memory of it was that I started giving all of this unsolicited feedback to the hosts and producers of the talk shows. And eventually they were like, well, if you think you know better, why don't you just come and work for us? And so I said, okay, great. And eventually there was an associate producer job that I got, largely through Chuck's support. And then, yeah, I mean, it became clear to me pretty quickly that really my gifts were in producing more than trying to do studio technical work. And I started to get to know you, Ted, not too long after joining. I was just very drawn to you in different ways. Just you would say, it seemed like you had a vision and a way of thinking about public media that just really spoke to me. And I kind of wanted to, and I got excited about the innovation potential for the station, which you were too. So I'll stop there for now, but that's how I got involved.
To refresh maybe through my memory, and I remember it was Jeff Hughes, I think, who
it was.
And we're interviewing somebody. I'm not sure, but I think you're going to like him.
I remember that too.
Oh, that's funny.
Or we'll come back to it after we get the introductions, but you did play a significant role. There was a team that developed there with Tom Wilson.
Right.
Jeff Luck came into it. That was
Jeff
really
Luck
on the way ahead of its time in terms of looking around beyond broadcast applications for visual media, as well as you've been working a lot with the radio, I think. So come back to that.
Yeah.
All right, Melanie.
Okay, so we came back to Penn State. My husband and I moved back here in January of 2000. And I started working for Penn State Outreach, which included kind of, public WPSU under its umbrella, and met Tom Kiter. And after I involved him in a project that I had, and WPSU hadn't been involved in a lot of these like cross-functional team projects. And so I was trying to pull you in or pull us in from that perspective, and got Tom involved. And then about a year and a half later, Ted, I remember seeing you do pledge for Beyond Stonewall. And I looked at you and thought, I like this guy. Like, where did he come from? And then figured out you came from Colorado. And I was like, of course, like he's not from here. And And then I met you. Yeah, we were on some cross-functional committee for outreach. And I remember very clearly you calling me and saying, hey, I just have a question to run by you. We need someone who's bilingual over here. And I said, that would not be me. And and you said, no, we need someone who speaks academe. We've got this new project coming in called Engaging Faculty in a Digital Future. And I need someone who knows the academic side of the house. And you seem nice enough. Tom likes you. And, and I said, I know very little about media. And you said, you're educable. We're good. And so I then we were able to figure out how to get a job to Red Rover me over to public broadcasting. So best move I ever made at Penn State. I wouldn't have been there as long as I was if I hadn't been able to do that.
And I do, as you mentioned, remember, I think it's when I first met you, and it was the night after pledging, and this came up a fair amount in our interview on KBDI, because we did a lot of programming toward the gay community. It was actually somewhat ahead of its time, but we found a very strong resonant audience in Denver, which was great.
Oh, wow.
Um, But we had just pledged that, and I think from pledging it on the air in central Pennsylvania, you don't get a lot of calls, unless it's in our town and you got the whole town up there. But it was, so it was a very different experience and very kind of a little bit strange to be on. And I think I saw you that day after at the outreach building, and I remember you just kind of mentioning that and stuff. And it was,
That's right, because I saw you were waiting for someone to pick you up in front of Keller Building.
yeah.
And I was walking in because that's where my office was. And I thought, oh my gosh, there he is. So I talked to you about it.
Oh, somebody watched.
Yeah. So that's how I got involved with engaging faculty in a digital future. I mean, that was the key that brought me in. So, and I don't know if you want me to go into that a little bit.
Yeah, why don't we stay with that a minute, because that name is ringing a bell now, but that's one of those ones where if you start talking, it'll bring something back for
I
me.
think it was the first CPB money that, because we were about to expand the pipe and we needed programming, and CPB put money into that, into the Engaging Faculty Initiative. The very first thing I think I did was I organized a conference and brought people in from Wisconsin and Ohio. I mean, all over the place. I still know people from that conference. Ruby Calvert, still I'm in touch with Ruby from that conference.
Before,
And that was probably in 03, maybe. Maybe I probably have materials somewhere, but yeah. And that was getting people talking just within the communities of how do we engage faculty in a different way other than how we have, which is as borrowed talent, which you go over to the university, you pick them up, you set them in a chair on this, in the studio, you talk to them for 20 minutes, then you pick them up and send them on their way. And my master's degree had actually been an extension around how do we bring research into a more public realm. That's what my master's degree was about. So then, and my doctorate is in counseling, which also helped.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, and that was fun. We had so much fun pulling faculty together. And after that, then we received another CPB grant, this time with Ohio State and Wisconsin. I can't remember the name of that one. If I look at my Vita, I'll be able to pull it up for you so that you know the name of it.
Maybe send it, because I do remember.
Yeah, there were at least two more grants that came through that all three of us had a part in. At first it was Byron, then it was Malcolm.
Yeah.
And And so we did a lot of looking at different modalities and different ways of pulling faculty into public media. And because our licensees were all, even though they were all university licensees, we operate very differently. And so trying to understand how you could engage faculty in these different ways was important. It was important to document and important for us to try. So, and the thing that I thought was so great was we were able to try different things.
Yeah.
And that's where then Lobby Talks came out of pulling together a
Yeah.
huge number of faculty. I mean, we filled the room, 25 people at least, with Nancy, Tawana, and Susan, and
That's right.
you know, we filled, and Gregg,
Uh-huh.
and Michael starts with a B,
Barabay,
Arabay,
Jonathan
and
Marks. Do you remember Jonathan Marks? Yeah.
Jonathan Marks, so who became a very good friend, and
Yeah, he's a great guy.
yeah, just wonderful. But that's where, in that group, is where we then started coming up with things like Lobby Talks, and that is where too that Nathan was brought on as an associate director, or as associate producer, but
Right, yeah.
you and I, Ted, had a different idea about bringing him in as a digital guy. And we couldn't let everybody know that, if I remember correctly. So there was some subterfuge to because it's not how, in a university, that's not how the job descriptions were written. And so you had to figure out how to maneuver the system in order to get things done. And that's when we pulled Nathan in. And then we had the Vote 08 project, which was huge, that Nathan wasn't, I mean, without Nathan would have never happened.
Yeah.
And then the Veterans Project, which was a whole different way of thinking about public service media.
Well, let me do that. Let me transition, then I'll come back as you get to Nate, because you're getting in. I mean, I
Yeah.
think bringing Nathan in is kind of like adding an Alka-Seltzer to a glass of water. You just watch it fizz.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be Alka-Seltzer.
There were a few headaches that came out of it.
We were so excited to put you in water.
That's what I wanted.
Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about it, because Melanie mentioned a few specific projects that were significant at the time.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, well, let's see. I mean, the context for me was, yeah, there was this mix of things that I was just so excited about that I didn't even really expect when I first started. I mean, I was, Chuck had been part of this vanguard of producers who had done these really lovely pieces about central Pennsylvania, some of which were very surprisingly creative, and very good. But there hadn't been that much. What I saw happening that was new was, first, Ted, you struck me as kind of you were like a rebel within the institution. You wanted to shake things up.
Yep.
And you were willing to sort of go outside the lines to do it, but it was all in the spirit of true public service and impact, and really thinking differently about that. And the things that you saw, that I saw you seeing and I was excited about, seemed to be the intersection of storytelling and community engagement, which we already had some of through the station, but then doing that in partnership with the thinkers and innovators at the university, which is a world-class university, and that hadn't really been done. That there was kind of a need for this storytelling around community building, around storytelling in concert with this like thought leadership and all of the creativity at the university and the research that was being done. And so that, I mean, you started the public service media group, which I got as soon as I started being part of that. It was just such a great salon of these different kinds of thinking, and it was like a fishbowl. It was like all these great ideas coming out of it. And one of those for me was I was at the public service media group and met an oral historian, Shirley Moody, who and we just got brainstorming and came up with an idea for CPB on doing a documentary film class for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans through Penn State Public Broadcasting that would also be a course. And then we made a whole multimedia project about it. I wish we had had the time to make a whole documentary because it really was extraordinary. I'd say it's probably the media project I'm most proud of in my career. Really. I mean, it was so special to spend that time with those veterans. And I got this group of veterans together, and over the course of a semester, they told their stories to each other, many of whom had never shared their stories with anybody, you know, and they felt safe to do that. So that was just really special. But then, yeah, I mean, Vote 08 was, I mean, we recorded video interviews with basically every single person running for anything in the entire region of central Pennsylvania and made it available. And the vision, which I still am excited about to this day, I mean, which still never was realized nationally, was that local and regional and state level politics and races could actually be as compelling and accessible to anybody who could vote. It would make people as invested, or at least possibly as invested, in all these where the real politics are happening as they are in these, you know, big national races. And it was, we actually did it. I mean, and it did increase the engagement a lot to have these things available. And it was great. It was working cross-functionally with, you know, digital team, and there's some innovators with the video team, with the radio folks, and just really getting out of silos, you know, is what I was doing. And I, just like you, Ted, I mean, I kind of liked that it was rebellious to do that, in part because there was a good cause. I mean, why were we not working together to do these things? I mean, it just didn't make any sense.
Well, it just, you know, in that particular case, well, I mean, our broadcast covered like a lot of territory in central Pennsylvania and a lot of different congressional districts, and there were a lot of races.
Yeah,
But television alone wasn't going to, I mean, it didn't
exactly.
really work as the vehicle. So all of this content was created and then it was made available online. And I remember there was one guy in the Democratic primary in one of the districts. I think he
Yeah.
might have even cut a promo, I don't know, but he said he would not have won the primary without
Yes.
that.
Oh, good memory.
Mark McCracken.
That's right. It was
Yeah.
Mark McCracken. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it was, go ahead, Ted.
No, I'm just saying, to repeat what you said, it was
Mm.
using radio and television more in an integrated manner and using online, which is, I think, one of the things that had not been done a whole lot there. And
Yeah, yeah, I think it was, what I saw it as was, if you get away from the question of platforms, it was, what is the actual value? What is the utility, the service? And the service that was really needed was, I don't know who any of these people are, and so I don't vote. And it was, well, we could do something about that. We just have to, I mean, it's not going to be by making a documentary on TV, but like, well, let's do something else. What could we do that would actually help you with this problem? And I think we actually did it. I mean, we came up with a template that would do that, which was pretty remarkable. I mean, for a local station to do. I mean, from as I look back on it, I mean, it was a very ambitious idea. It was something that, you know, you had to be a little bit nutty to think that we could do it, you know, and we did it, you know. So
We had to be a little nutty to think we could do any of this stuff.
I know, seriously.
You know, it's because Ted, the thing that made me want to work with you was, one of the things was that you had a vision that went outside those silos. And Nate and I both, like, that's how we saw things, because we didn't come from within. We were coming from outside and we could see it, but a lot of people inside, you know, you have a TV silo, you have a radio silo, they're funded differently, you know, and then there's this digital thing that we're trying to figure out how to fund.
Yeah.
And you know, and it was not about the color of the money. It was, how do we make this project work? And I appreciated that you would suspend disbelief long enough for us to create something and then figure it out afterwards. But
yeah, no, and that part of the reason I wanted to talk to the three of you is you had your own vision. So
Mhm.
it's
yeah,
kind of how it wasn't, it wasn't just my vision, but it had, and I should mention, Nate, just so the folks who don't know you, you went from Penn State to head up social media for Frontline,
Right.
WGBH, and then you went from there to, it's an American
Yeah.
Public Media.
Mhm. Yeah, I was the head of podcasts for American Public Media. Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cool.
You,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I became I was the head of content for 10% Happier, which is a whole meditation company, including a
Oh.
great podcast by Dan Harris, who is a Nightline correspondent.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, did a lot of other stuff. But just before
taught
we
you
move on from
everything
this,
you knew,
oh,
but
God,
I say we taught you everything you knew, but that just-
everything. No, but you know what though? I would say, honestly, I mean, I was so spoiled by getting to work with you, Ted. I mean, it still was the best job I ever had. I mean, of my whole career, it was the best job I ever had. And I think that for me, that was because, yeah, there's a variety of reasons for that, but I mean, it was camaraderie, and we were actually getting to change things, and you gave us permission and encouragement and cheerleading to really take chances and to think differently, and gave us kind of a sandbox to do that was really meaningful. And we had sort of there was an actual commitment to mission that was we couldn't manage it forever because the politics were changing, but
Yeah.
when that period of time was in place, that was all lined up, the potential, and to me what it showed in terms of, I mean, I still am so proud of this time because to me it was about proving what a local public media entity could be to its community, what it could be in the 21st century. I mean, what it needs to become. And that's not a small thing. It's a part of the fabric of our way of life that we could still play this integral role in civic discourse and storytelling and bringing people together. And we were really charting a path to something new that was, to me, essential in our lives. And to get to do that with other people who were so excited about it and so committed to the vision of it, which it came from the top. I mean, I've learned this in my subsequent years, that the personality and the potential of any organization really is so embedded in the person who is leading it. That sensibility kind of creates the whole ethos, the vibe, what it's like to be there. And I just think, having been a rebel at KBDI and then doing that from the inside at Penn State, for me, that was just the perfect DNA to do what we did. And I thank you for that, Ted. I mean, I always feel grateful to have had that time in my working life. It was very precious. And you too, Melanie. I mean, you were a huge part of that. I mean, I saw the two of you as really the spiritual leaders of what we were doing. That's what it felt like.
There was something very magical when it all aligned, and there was a time in there where it really aligned.
Mhm.
And it was, I mean, I feel very, very fortunate that I was there at that moment.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it really coincided with everything STS represented, which is taking a really careful, critical, interdisciplinary look at the sciences and culture and literature and bringing it all together, and really breaking down barriers between different fields and getting into a place where people were not experts and learning from each other. God, that was so important. And it
Mhm.
felt so possible and so good and really fun. Yeah.
And we had,
I
and
wanna-
we had
oh.
changes, I mean, made changes too.
What?
And I want to come back because we existed at that time in a particular culture at Penn State that, good, bad, or ugly, allowed this to happen, and that didn't. So, and I do want to come back to that. But one other thing, Nate, that I remember that specifically looking forward to, I mean, the group, and when I would walk around the station, there was your group. I'd call it your group, but it was, Tom, and I forget the other guy who then moved to Washington, and
Steve Nelson. Mhm.
Steve Nelson,
Yeah.
Jeff
And
Locke.
Jeff Luck. Jeff Luck was.
And we would meet. We started to meet, I think, almost weekly. We were
Mhm.
meeting, and we were tracking. Because you talk about being local, but one of the things that I was
Right.
attracted to Penn State is that it's not local. I mean, it's an internationally known university.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you look at its world campus, it's all over the world.
Right.
And so the content that we potentially could create, and I think some of the work,
Good.
a lot of your focus is on actually doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's looked at, was made available far wider than our central Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
But that
Absolutely.
group, we would meet, it would be basically, we had something, remember the cooperative extension, 2-minute gardener, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But that would be one of the things that we had. It was online. I forget, was it a YouTube channel that we had? Or was
Mhm.
it? And I don't
Well,
remember.
the very first project that I did for you, Ted, was Penn State On Demand. That was
Okay.
right. So, but where we were cataloging all the content and making it available in a video on demand service. But yes, that Joe Myers led the reinvention of the 2-minute gardener, right? And we came up with that new prototype, and it was
Yeah.
it was YouTube. We had a lot of successful things on YouTube.
Yeah, but
By the way,
we
you're
yeah, go ahead.
Oh no,
No.
I was just going to say I really agree with you. I mean, the reimagination of what a local entity could be was a part of what made it special, but then also the reimagination of what a university affiliate could be nationally and internationally was happening at the same time. So it was almost like we were innovating on two fronts and they were benefiting each other, which is really interesting. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would track, and I forget what the different the Google Analytics, and they're fairly, I don't know what year it was, but
oh yeah,
early on in all of this.
very early.
But we'd be saying, oh my God, springtime in Northern California, they're really tuning in.
That's right.
Yeah,
You
they
are-
want
yeah.
they want to know about rhubarb,
Yeah, they
That's
wanna-
right. That's what it was. That's right.
Good. Yeah, wasn't it? I mean, there was
Uh-huh.
some rhubarb thing that went.
That's true. No, the rhubarb was hilarious. We had this rhubarb video that was like a viral sensation. It was like the most popular thing we ever put out. That's right.
So
Yeah, yeah. No, it was called the content distribution group or something funny sounding like that. And yeah, I think I started it or like I don't remember, Ted. We like brainstormed it, and it was this kind of new idea of really being audience led digital strategy, where we would it was constantly iterating. We were trying things. Well, what if we did this? And Jeff Luck who's very cantankerous and also had all these just off the wall ideas that we would try. And Ted would say, oh, sure. All right, give it a shot. Try the set top box thing. Let me know how it goes, And that was really fun. But then we would come back and just look at what are we learning? What are we learning? What are we learning? Always, coming back to that question.
What year would that have been? Do you remember?
Yeah. So that was from we were doing that from roughly 2007 to 2009.
Yeah.
In that time frame.
Yeah.
And that was very early in this. Very early and truly was ahead of its time, as you say, especially for a station.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
So, and I want to come back to, I have a question for Susan and for Melanie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I want to go back because I think I forget the name, the group that we started, and you really pulled together the faculty members for it.
Oh, yeah.
I think we called it the Public Service Media Group.
Public service media and the research
That's what it
university.
was.
That's what we called it. Yeah.
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 I mean, we would meet what every month or every couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think it was every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And we read stuff. We read articles about media, and then we'd read other articles that weren't specifically about media, but they might have been about race or about culture or something, and we'd discuss them. Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't intentionally pragmatic, but it did.
No.
It seeds some different ideas, and I think specifically we mentioned lobby talks was in some way was one of you describe it.
Who, me or Melanie?
Susan, go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, what I remember about the lobby talks is there would be a topic, like I can't remember, one was on disability studies, I think, maybe, and I don't remember.
Different modalities with dementia.
Good, yes, that's right, and
Probably.
that would be Jesse, oh, I can't remember his last name now, but he's now at Drexel, I think, or at Penn, yeah, it's a great guy, damn. And there would be several people on the topic in a panel from different parts of the university or from different parts of the community. And they would each give talks, and there would be a moderator. Gregg Schnirring was one hell of a good moderator, as I remember. And then there would be people in the audience who would line up and ask questions, and it would just go on. It was really an exciting thing. It's this is so nice getting that memory back. It's still fairly fuzzy, but I'm getting it back, and I enjoyed that.
I remember the one on the Amish, and we actually had, that one had overflow. We had a big
Yes.
lobby in the new building, and that one was
Yes.
kind of overflow, and it did feel like we were having a community discussion.
Yeah, yeah. And another bit of this that I think was in sync, or that had something to do with how it worked, was that Ted, you and I lived next door to each other, and Graham Spanier was an old friend of mine from way back.
Former
And
president of Penn State.
yeah, former president of Penn State, many other things associated with him now, poor guy. But in any case, and he came with a background in radio and maybe in television too. So there was also that, and he was enthusiastic about things being put together. Maybe, I don't remember. I mean, I know in meetings, he was probably a very different person than the person that I hung out with or went whitewater kayaking with. But nonetheless, I think he was fairly positive about the idea of having sort of a connection between the university faculty and the university TV radio station,
Yes.
making it. So
Yeah. He was a very smart guy, not, yeah, not an
Yeah.
easy guy to know, but
no, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're right, that he actually understood public media more than most.
Well, he hosted his own, hosted
Yes,
his
he
own
did.
show. I
That's
mean,
right.
You
Yeah.
know,
And he
you
interviewed people.
allowed him to host his own show. And I know some people gave you some shit for that.
Ah,
Oh, yeah.
You know, giving the university president a platform like that.
yeah.
And so that took guts to give
So-
him that.
To the best of my knowledge.
To the best of my knowledge, right? What a title.
Uh-huh.
Good job, David.
That was a-
Uh-huh.
Or as I had friends who called it, as far as I know.
And yeah, and it was radio to begin with, and then he
Yeah.
wanted TV added to it, so we
Yeah.
said, why not?
Mhm.
You know,
Oh,
so go ahead.
we did a lobby, didn't we? We did a lobby talk, I think, on autism that Chloe Silverman was involved in, and that was very, very compelling and had a lot of people in the community interested in it, if I'm remembering right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and-
they tended to be medical or scientific or cultural things that cross-cut various different fields.
Remember
So-
the one assisted living community that would always show up.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Which actually, I mean, we laugh, but my God, what a
With a Quaker base.
benefit.
Yeah.
What an incredible benefit for those communities. And I mean, I have to say, I'm not here in Pennsylvania very much now. I'm in New York most of the time, but just from the little I'm hearing, oh my God, those were golden days for the
They were.
university and for the, WPSU. And it is so sad right now. So that was just such a wonderful time.
Well, and we had the new building, and so it was
Yes.
an opportunity to open the new building.
Yeah.
And that was, we beat that drum till we couldn't beat it anymore.
I can remember one quick thing, Graham Spanier touring the building when it was just finishing construction. And he came into my office and still didn't have any furniture. And he kind of squatted down in the middle and he kind of looked around and said, yeah, it's about the same as Gary Miller's. It's okay. Gary Miller was the head of the distance ed world campus. And so he was conscious of size.
Oh, God. Yeah, you were dealing with somebody who was always really in 7th grade mentally, but that's a whole different issue. With good and bad. Yeah.
I think too, then there was this other part, and Ted, tell me if you want to talk about that. But
yeah, I think if you're going where I'm going, the larger projects, which you were
yeah,
really the key in making those happen.
yeah. And when we went, when the vision went from just local, and I don't mean to diminish it, but to say, my God, we can do national projects, and that have a local service component.
Yeah.
So that was the difference for me between public media and public service media, was there was an element of what am I doing with this in my community? As well as how am I hooking into something that is much larger in this world. And so liquid assets, which is
Yes.
about
thinking-
infrastructure, water infrastructure
Yeah.
was the first one that we did. And it was a huge undertaking because it was, I mean, just raising that much money. We had never raised that much money for a project.
How much did you raise?
We raised a little over well, it was all included, we raised a little over $1 million.
Yeah.
And eight something for the production, and then we raised more than that at the end for promotion. Because they were so happy to promote it. But also to deal with questions of how do we fund things and keep editorial control, but allow people who may have a dog in this fight contribute.
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
and I remember Elaine Brzezicki saying, and I just looked at her and thought, that may be the most brilliant thing you've ever said. Which she said, unless we figure out how to take money from organizations that care about a topic and still keep our editorial integrity, we will never make another movie. We will never make another documentary that is about anything but a cannon on a battlefield at sunset. Because there will be nothing we can do that will be that will be current. And it was I've used it so many times when I was trying to explain editorial integrity to Verizon, for example. And getting people to give us money with no editorial control, which is a feat. But there was that, and working with the College of Engineering. And then telling Amy's story, which was our domestic violence
Right.
initiative, that I still get notes from women who say, you helped me leave a potentially really bad situation. And that was in 2010.
Mhm.
And that was with Verizon. And in pretty much they funded, but they funded it a little bit at a time. So we had to learn how to build that project as we flew it. So we were building that plane as we flew it.
Jeez.
Yeah, that was
So
an excellent documentary. I mean,
yeah, telling Amy is one of those things I'm very, very proud of. I will be proud of till
Mhm.
forever.
yeah.
And,
It brings up a general thing, and I've noticed, I thought of it some in the KBDI interviews, but I didn't bring it up, is sometimes the people you work with, not in any of your cases, but they're difficult people. I mean, the Tom Kiter and Joe Myers, two production folks, were just groundbreaking in some ways in terms of the work they did in public media. But, we're not necessarily the best for the culture. Is
Mhm.
that fair to
Yeah.
say?
yeah,
We can blank
well,
it. But
they had a different way of thinking. Tom came from the academic side of the house, did not come from public media.
Mhm.
And Tom also came from a commercial. He had his own business. So he was coming with a different mindset. And sometimes that really, really clashed. And that's where it was important, again, it's like to be bilingual, because I could navigate that area, which was not sometimes easy. Thank you for,
yeah, you were able to hear them in a way that others could not, I think.
yes, yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm having lunch with them next Tuesday.
Oh, that's so great.
So yeah, but those big projects, and then we went on with the water project and got Subaru involved. And so those big projects, I think it was certainly groundbreaking for us as a station, but also we were doing things that university licensees were not doing. And creating something that had an interactive component that individual stations could buy into and could take and use. And that was really one of the most critical things was if it wasn't something that could be, Telling Amy's Story was not just a great documentary about domestic violence, but also then was the catalyst for individual community conversations and for book club conversations around domestic violence.
Yeah. What was
And
the title of
Geospatial Revolution was amazing too.
What was?
Geospatial Revolution.
Oh.
Incredible.
And that's the
Yeah.
other one, yeah, that was not for
Oops.
broadcast, but the Geospatial Revolution. Again, getting allowing organizations that had an interest. GPS was new, and figuring out how to keep our editorial integrity and how to keep it, not just to keep it for real, but to keep the illusion or the the word I'm missing. We were afraid that people might think there was a
Like the aura of or whatever, yeah.
yeah, it was more of a you didn't want people to think that it was being made to promote something. And sometimes you go out of your way to make sure that's not happening, but people will still think it.
Mhm.
And so you have to be ready for that. And so, but you again, Ted, we knew what we were doing. We knew, I remember you looking at me at one point and saying, if you're not ready to have people call you names and complain, and find your home phone number, you're not ready for this job. And I was like, shit. Okay, all right, I didn't realize that, but okay. And once I understood that, I was I was all in.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking somewhere in that time period, I was also as chair of the Affinity Group Coalition Public Television,
Yeah.
was chairing the editorial integrity project that was funded by CPB
Yeah.
and was actually facilitating meetings around different parts of the country. And I remember one, it was out west, and the head of Nebraska Public Television, we were using examples about, we developed a whole kind of list of kind of things to be aware of. I think it was prompted by Byron talking about election coverage in Wisconsin, and then Republicans would pull into the parking lot. All they would see would be stickers for all the Democrats.
Oh, God.
And say, there's something here we have to get a handle on before it gets out of control. But the head of Nebraska was talking about this great show they'd done on meat that had been sponsored by the major meat company in Nebraska.
Yes.
And he was using it as an example of it's fine.
Right.
It's happened to be the meeting's good for you.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I was turning myself literally inside out, like, to make sure that we never, it was like, yeah, it made me crazy. And, but
Well,
geospatial was, again, a way that we pushed those boundaries because it wasn't for broadcast. So it didn't mean that we didn't keep our editorial integrity intact, but it did mean that we didn't have to armor up quite as much. Because there was a lot of armoring up that we had to do.
Yeah.
Or that I felt like I had to do at some point, and I felt like I had to armor you up too.
Yes.
So if I could put armor between, and then all around us, then I thought, well, then we were okay. But
Yeah.
Well, speaking of armoring, I don't know, would it be helpful to talk at all about the, I think that, ultimately the Penn State connection was both a blessing and a curse, right? I could say a little bit about my experience of that, if that's of interest.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that we met in your office with Bill Mahone. Bill, was that his name? Bill Mann?
Bill
Bill
Mann.
Mann. That's it. Bill
yeah.
Mann. Bill Mann.
Bill Mann.
And I remember just thinking, I think we're gonna have a problem.
So Bill, for other people, Bill was one of
Yeah.
the heads of the PI, public information or marketing or publicity, or
God, yeah.
the answer to
Yeah.
Steve McCarthy, I think.
Well, and the reason for that was just that, like, it was very convivial and everything, but I could just feel like it was this sense that I got from him, from like university, and also from eventually from Craig Weideman in his office too, the head of outreach. But it was just kind of like they were like, okay, what you guys are doing is okay, but you are working for us. And if we need you to be on our team, you're going to be on our team, you know? And I remember kind of that sense right away. And it wasn't like there was a lot of disputes at first, but I could feel how if the something hit the fan, it would be like, you better line up, you know? And I knew that was going to come somehow. I mean, I just, what's that?
Boy, did it. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But you know what? I don't know if you were there still. I mean, actually, within my first month, I think, on the job, Jim Ryan, the then head of outreach, called me, and he was always very careful to preface everything by, "Now, I'm not telling you what to do. I would never." But you know, we had a radio reporter who was covering the black protest against the university down at the student union, I think, and she was covering it, and he said, now she's been kind of harsh on, she's been, you know, we're a little worried about, and
Mhm.
I just kind of blubbered. I didn't really say anything, and I never talked to the reporter because I didn't want to get in the middle of it, and nothing came of it. I mean, she was a really good reporter, but it was kind of that mark about, we're behind you all the way, kind of. You remember the time when they did the This American Life, I think, did the
Oh my God, of course.
on the party school. Penn State
Oh,
was
yeah.
going party school, and they had this great show on
It was great.
how bad it was.
Yep.
And we did a live follow-up to it. And the guy, I forget his name, but he was the head of student relations.
Darren or something.
Damon Sims.
Damon Sims.
Yeah,
It was
Damon
great. I
Sims.
mean, he came on, I mean, we did a live show following up, and he was pretty honest about it. But we got, you know, it's one of those things that nobody would ever call me up and say, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't have done it. It was like a silent, like you were, what's that term when
Shunned.
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 Frozen, shunned,
Yes.
or
yeah,
doxed.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was always in the air about, remember who you work for. And that got, especially, we're not going to get into it here, but in the later part with Sandusky and all of that,
That's what I was wondering about. Yeah, sorry. That the two things that seemed really hot, and I don't know that I don't know how they figure in, or if they never did, was the whole debate over fracking, which was so hot
Exactly.
at some point.
Yep.
had
Which
some
we did a
people make
project
a lot
on.
of money.
That
What?
was a public
Yeah.
service meeting.
That was a public, I couldn't remember. I thought
Yeah.
maybe it was.
Yeah, it was a website.
Okay.
It was but we got, I mean, we went out and got funding, and I forgot all about that project.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Oh.
I don't remember, I have no mental map of when the Sandusky thing happens and how it relates to, were you still at Penn State, Ted?
November
I
of
don't-
2011.
Yes, and it was
Oh, yeah.
actually, things were getting worse, but that just was kind of over the
Yeah.
top. And
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that hit me, this was a few days after Spanier had been fired,
Yeah.
and it was like early, I think Monday morning after the weekend, or at 7:30, showing up in studio control in our facility, and the acting head of the university, Rod Erickson, and
Rod Erickson.
a little coat, you know, group around him, you know, the PI people, and they're like talking about, you know, where Rod should do, how he should walk through the campus, you know. And they kind of first, you know, somebody said, well, you could walk by the library. Somebody else said, yeah, the paternal library. And if you go this way, you go through the sports facility. No, we got to avoid that. And they were basically looking at how to manage Rod Erickson in his first few days. And I'm standing in there saying, why am I here? They think I am part of their cover thing. And, right after that, I said, we're going to do, I didn't say it in that, but we planned a live call-in show on child abuse and sexual abuse. And
Yep.
when I met with the then head of outreach, I said, we're going to do this show and it'll be fair, but we want to, it's a hot issue. It's an issue a lot of people are thinking about, a lot of concern. And he looked at me and he said, what if they tell you can't do it? It was like this
Wow.
amorphous they.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well,
they did, but
yeah.
it just was one of those feelings like I'm an alien now. I've been uncovered,
Right.
Uh-huh.
alien in the midst here.
Well, and the lawyers running so much by the beginning of when that happened, everybody was lawyered up and everything was.
Well, I remember, Ted, you and I had a discussion about how we were at a point where Penn State could either become like the Dana-Farber example of how to deal with a tragedy, and
Right.
or we could hand the keys to marketing and legal.
Yeah, well,
And and you offered to actually have a camera crew follow people in Old Main 24/7 if we needed to, in order to help the university take that first path.
Yeah.
And
It's totally genuine. It'd be raw, but it would
Yep.
be kind of honestly confronting
Yeah.
something that was a traumatic experience at the university. And
Yep. And
absolutely,
yeah, I remember that you and I having that conversation.
God.
And I remember then having it because I was still in Old Main doing my crap one day a week, and feeling like a little bit of my soul was like left in the heart every time I went in.
God.
And
Could you put a context around this? I mean, for us who don't know what you're talking about.
well,
the
you
Yeah.
remember
Yes, we remember the Joe Paterno thing and a bunch of other things, but
that's really what it was about.
Yeah.
It was about Gary Sandusky, child abuse.
okay, I remember that now.
Yes, that's what it was about, and how at that moment, child abuse, just like domestic violence, exists in the dark. And right
Right.
now it was
Right.
wide open with all the light in the world
Yeah.
on it. And we could either continue to elucidate that, or we as a university could shut it down.
Right.
They chose to hand the keys to
Mhm.
both the legal department and the marketing department.
Mhm.
But it put a wedge. I agree with Susan. I think it was a moment in the change in culture at Penn State generally,
Yes.
where they
Mm.
became so insular and so
Yeah.
frightened.
Circle the wagons.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
Right. Yeah.
and you're either inside the circle or you're outside. And
Right. Whose side are
um,
you on?
yeah, and don't you dare think that you can go outside and come back in.
Yeah. But
And
Mhm.
it is a quiet shunning. It's not.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
That's
very
why it has some cuts too. So,
polite, very polite shunning, very
Polite
sort
shunning.
of blue blazer shunning.
yes.
Yep. Yep.
A lot of blazer.
I said it's like them poking us with a fork and watching us bleed to death. Takes a while.
Now, it is important to remember that Joe Paterno, it's not stretching to say he was considered almost a saint in
Yeah.
Oh,
that part of the
Absolutely.
country.
absolutely.
So it
Absolutely.
people always talked about him as Joe, any kind of call-ins, anything. It was like he was who, the football games were like religious outings. And
He used his
go out-
glasses.
they were-
He auctioned off his glasses.
Oh,
for
God.
money for WPSU. Remember?
Oh, sure.
did the
Oh, yeah.
football coaches show, but it's not just us. It was
Yeah.
not just the university. It was the whole kind of area of Central PA.
Absolutely.
it was Joe said this and Joe's gonna do this and,
Yeah.
oh,
Well,
it's like the
And
Pope.
Joe,
Right.
Joe
I think
supports
it's a,
the library.
lead,
Joe's a classicist, you know?
Aren't you gonna lead?
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got 10 minutes.
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I wanted to make sure you got to say something, if you wanted to make sure that a particular. I mean, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I could say something about this, but I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there anymore at the time the Paterno thing happened. I had left
But
not too
you're,
long
in
before that.
looking back at your time at Penn State, and especially with Ted coming to the station, and you
Mhm.
had some reference to a golden era that lasted a
Absolutely.
long time.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm just sort of asking if, you know, your reflections on that or whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's such a fascinating story. I mean, it's just a great story. I mean, the conference, it's like you know, what made it possible in some avenue, you know, was also the seeds of its downfall. You know, that, I mean, we were dependent upon, you know, Penn State very, very deeply. I mean, it was WPSU, you know,
Mhm.
I mean, that's what it is, right? And I mean, you go to the football games and they say, we are Penn State. And
Oh,
then
God.
Joe Paterno is Penn State, you know, and it's WPSU. And but we really, you know, we, like there was
I was
both this.
thinking more about Ted.
Oh, about Ted. Yeah, yeah,
Ted's
totally.
coming, and
Yeah, yeah.
and the
Well, you couldn't say
idea.
Ted was Penn State in that way. You
No,
preserved
but
a
that's
gap there,
exactly
and
right.
that was
That's
so
exactly right.
powerful. Yeah.
Mhm.
You perceive a gap between Ted's identity. I mean,
He preserved a gap. He kept himself an individual as apart from Penn. I mean, I'm just
Well,
gonna say,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
to me, I mean, well, go ahead, David.
No.
No, well, I was going to say, I mean, to me, the what's occurring to me is there's actually a congruousness or a compatibility conceptually between the spirit of public media and the spirit of university inquiry, you know, and that they are both about the free exchange of ideas. They're about freedom of expression. They're about public debate and discourse. I mean, that's, you know, they have a deep synergy, you know, to use an overused word, in theory. And to me, Ted really got that and was a champion of that. You know, that's what that to me, it was, we're on the same team here. You know, we are trying to advance the public good. And you were modeling and hoping that the better angels of those institutions, you know, would stay at the table, even if the going got tough, you know, even if the institutions, you know, money or reputation was on the line, that you were hoping and modeling in the way you were conducting yourself, that they would still make the hard choices to stay aligned with those bigger ideals. And I think you're fighting for that. It was, I wished you hadn't needed to go to the mat for it the way that you did. But I think it was the embodying of those principles. To me, that's the greatest potential for a university affiliate, is the kind of marriage of those values, you know, and you are really advocating and modeling that in a way that very few university affiliates have successfully done. I mean, it's a template to me. And then, you know, ultimately though, you're part of these bigger institutional currents that, you know, weren't up to us. And I mean, whenever I dip my toe in the broader bureaucracy, it was like this Kafkaesque experience of just total gibberish. I mean, it was just go to try to be part of these task forces for Outreach's future. And what I would conclude is that they had no idea what they were, what they should be, and that they didn't know how to make any decisions about it. It was just a complete mess. But at Penn State, I mean, you know, just to get back to Ted, you wrote a document that was a narrative vision, basically almost like a sketch, like a storyboard of what could this station become? What is it going to be in 50 years? And it was all these different sketches of scenes about the station. of different ways it could play a part in community life. It could collaborate with even like healthcare systems and the university and all of the public good it could do. And it was bold, and it was specific and inspiring. And I mean, to me, that was why I felt so good about coming to work every day, is because we were trying to build something that it wasn't, yes, I had my own vision for it, but my vision was part of and supported by a bigger vision and a bigger sensibility that you had espoused. And I understood it. And whenever I'm in job interviews ever since then, and people are like, well, what's good leadership about? I do feel like I learned a key lesson in it from you, many of them, but which was to be able to rally people together around an actually clear vision, something that people can see, something that people could touch and imagine, and how rare it is really that leaders are able to do that, usually because they're just not willing to take the chance to actually go out on a limb and say, here's where I think we're going. I'm going to make it crystal clear, and tell me, how do you feel about it? Like, let's do this together. And that's what you did. And I think the golden age we had emerged out of that willingness, and honestly, just the feeling in your gut about why this made a difference. Why are we doing this? Why are we devoting our time and our lives to this? And you just had that fire in your belly, that we could all feel about why this mattered. So that's what was so special about that time. And it is very rare to find any institution that has both maybe the ignorance or the gumption to put somebody like Ted in charge.
Yeah. Right.
Well, and to be honest, and then for Ted to hire people like me and you,
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, because then, because part of when you say that, yes, it was clear, but it was clear enough. I mean, what was really good was Ted's vision was clear enough that we would say, okay, so I have an idea.
Right.
Like, and then how would this fit into
Exactly.
this larger frame? And it was like, go for it. Like, I trust you, go for it. Let's see. And, and that is part of that rare, golden age as well.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. The only thing I want to say about that is you're so right, Melanie, that, I mean, ultimately it's not just, Ted, you had this dream, but you then took a chance on people, and you saw potential in people. And, you were really the first person in my life, I mean, who really saw, I mean, I had a good philosophy teacher in high school who really saw what I could be. But I mean, as an employer, I mean, you saw what the potential that I had, even if I didn't fully know it, but I felt it. And you kind of pushed me to say, like, be better at you, do it, and do it here. Yeah. And that meant everything to me. I mean, that changed my life.
Well, I think we record all this so it could be played at my funeral.
I will say, what I keep thinking, I keep having this vision, Ted, of many, many situations where you would ask this big open-ended question of a group of people, and then you just sit there with this grin on your face as people answered it one way or another, and then you'd parry back at them and ask some more questions. I mean, you were like the king of really thought-provoking, open-ended questions, and then just really enjoying when that would create confusion, or maybe people would disagree, and you didn't shut it down. You opened it up, and that was just so much fun.
Yeah.
Well, that, again, to Melanie's point about hiring, I mean, the fun part was that we had a group that you couldn't have just found anywhere. I mean, I think it was a combination of folks that were in academia who actually, were kind of using their brain in really creative ways and kind of pulling together. And that was, to me, what I dreamed. I mean, my reason for going to Penn State, aside from having some kind of more stability than I had at KBDI, was the land grant mission, and actually reading up on that and saying that makes sense. I mean, there's something there that's very powerful.
which
Yeah.
you educated me in. I didn't even know about it when I got to Penn State, and you gave me all the literature on it and sort of lit a fire in my head about that. So that was, and I'm from Wisconsin. I should know about it, you know? Yeah.
Yes.
The
Sorry.
boundaries of the campus are the boundaries of the state in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and here the boundaries of the campus are the boundaries of what? Learning, responsibility, anything like,
Yes.
and that was the problem that you came and dealt with, Ted, and did such great stuff. You know?
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
so some of the things I'm looking forward to is now we can get a sort of a timeline going. And I think Melanie, especially with all the projects that you guys worked on, to work out some kind of list of all the things that you've done.
Yeah, I
Um,
can do that.
and I mean, yeah, to understand Ted in many ways, it's that it comes from when you listen to his first part that Craig did. Like, by the way, Craig, please jump in if you want to say something. He ran Act One about 2 weeks ago,
Mm.
but Ted had a background, I guess, of intellectual. What would you say, Ted? I mean, you know, if you look at all the well springs that help develop your attitude toward life and so forth, certainly when you deal with the Zen part of it, I think did the people at Penn State know about your background? And
I think Susan
did.
probably
I certainly did.
do a meditation. at
oh,
your
they
house.
were next door neighbors.
Well, yeah, we meditated together. Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's good. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Melanie and they probably know this.
Oh,
don't-
I figured it out eventually as I got to know you more and heard about Allen Ginsberg and hot tubs and time in
I was
Europa.
wrong, I think.
Yeah.
It was great. It was great.
And
I
sitting
just
with
liked you
Susan
more and
on
more.
Friday mornings, that was always on your calendar. So
So, yeah,
Yeah,
sitting with Susan was always on your calendar on Friday mornings.
you know,
yeah, that's great.
Um,
I didn't even remember when we did it. That's
It literally said sitting with Susan.
terrific. Yeah.
Because
I have to.
Brenna looked at me and said, do you know
Okay.
what sitting with
Well,
Susan
thank
is?
you, and
Yeah,
hopefully we'll
sorry.
see you again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry that I have to go, but
Oh, Nathan,
thank you. This
so
is
good
such
to
a
see you.
pleasure,
And
and I'm happy to
where are
help with
you
the
at
timeline.
now? Hey,
Good to see
Hey,
you.
I
Greg.
live in the Bay Area, the
Oh,
San
nice.
Francisco Bay. Mhm.
hey, so you work
That's
for
great.
now whom?
I work for Q Catalyst. It's a digital. It's basically a digital consulting firm, mostly focused on public media, run by the former head of digital for PBS, Jason Seiken.
Yeah.
Oh, I know him. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah,
Well,
it's
we'd
good.
like
It's
to
really
track you down and have another conversation.
well. Please do. Yeah.
Yes.
And before I go too, I just want to say, Susan, that you were a really inspiration to me when I was at Penn State too.
Oh.
You were really represented the kind of person and thinker and leader that, was some of what made that time in that organization so special, was that, that Ted had the vision to bring you closer and be part of what we were doing. It was just so exciting because your work was just extraordinary. I mean,
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, back at you. Yeah, really.
oh,
It was
thank you.
just great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank
I'm
you for
gonna,
joining us.
yeah, I
You're
want to
welcome.
track you down, Nathan, and see what you're doing now.
Oh, please. I'd
I'm
love
gonna
to talk.
Google stalk you.
Okay, go for it. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, Nate.
All right, thanks,
Yeah,
Nick.
bye-bye.
And I should mention, Susan, because we met, it was very random. We met some kind of cocktail thing on right off campus. Do you remember that?
Me? No.
Yes, we met. When I first met you, I didn't realize you were a neighbor. It was some kind of event that was right on College Avenue, and we just started talking. So it was very random that we were actually neighbors, and then
It's weird. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Was it one of those University Club Bob Potter things? Or was it?
yeah, I have no idea. All I
Oh.
remember is you were
I seem to remember that. I seem to remember that Bob Potter was how you two met. I mean,
Yes,
aside
yeah.
from being neighbors, yeah.
Yeah, he used to have those university club parties.
Yeah, I don't know how the heck I remember that because I was not a part of them, but I remember that
Well,
story.
thank you for being auxiliary to my brain. I can't speak, but that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know,
Well, Ted, you need to come back to this neighborhood. I know there's a lot of resistance, but it'd be so nice if you and Pat would come back at some point. We could hang out. Melanie, yeah.
Okay.
I don't see you
No, I
jumping
don't
at it.
have resistance. Actually, my kids, Haley still, she's been back a few times.
mhm,
But I don't know, you're all over the world. I mean, you're in
yeah,
Europe.
you're everywhere, Susan. And
You know, our daughter and son-in-law are moving from Seattle to Bollesburg to move in with us for the next 2 years, Melanie, while they build their
Oh.
house in Vermont.
oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah, so they're going to be living in our house. We'll be in New York and here.
Okay.
So there's an incentive, Ted. Come.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, we'll follow up then.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Greg, do you have?
Can I
Oh,
just
my
say
God.
one thing before I lose it is I also think we talk about the things being lined up. The fact that public media needed content, the fact that at that moment in history, like we were going digital, that was huge in this because some people were trying to fill it up with more, traditional stuff. And it gave us an opportunity to fill it with non-traditional stuff. And so I just wanted to, because that's part of it. That was part of the mechanics of it that I think that made that point in history really important.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I think, obviously, if you just look at the decline of broadcast and the rise of
Right.
all the various digital platforms, how you work with that in your community, whether local or university, that was an area I mean, we certainly didn't know how extreme it would get, but that was kind of a whole world we were exploring at that time.
Right. Which if we hadn't had that road to go down, I think it would have looked different.
That's really interesting.
You think that was disruptive in that sense?
No, I think it was disruptive for the way things used to be, but I think it was really for us at the time, I think it was really useful to have that space, to know that we had to fill it somehow. Or that we were going to fill it somehow. And because I remember it was one of the very first things that you guys had to educate me about because I didn't know anything about it. And you talked about the pipe and how the pipe, like, and suddenly we had this huge pipe and nothing in it. And and so that was this, for me, it was this like possibility that was extraordinary.
Remember the one show before I go to Greg, I forgot, it was the one very near the end, but you can't say that.
Yes, you can't say
That was
that.
sort of the edge that this was a show by the most popular, I don't know how he was considered academically, Susan, but he had this whole class.
Sociology class.
Oh, I know who you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was kind of a guru in sociology. Yes.
Yeah.
It
Sam,
was all
somebody
about
maybe?
talking about race, and
Yes.
he was a white guy, but he very kind of provocative, and this was around the time when Obama, I think, was running for president, and all of this, a lot of this stuff was very heightened, and he'd have this class that
Mhm.
was just captivating. I mean, watching it, he'd get these kids like talking in ways and being very open for better or worse. And
Sam Richards, is that who it was? Sam Richards?
Sam
Yeah.
Richards, we had
Mhm.
a plan to actually make a national series out of it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and actually I think it would have done
I think it would have done really well.
it would have done very well at that particular time, and actually even today. And that was the one where it was kind of the last straw, where it was basically scotched by outreach, and they had this weird way of looking at what money, and it was didn't make any sense at all. But I think they were basically afraid of the topic as much as anything. But
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I forgot all about that. You're right.
yeah, that's in when things were going bad. But so,
Wow.
Greg, you have it. This is better than
Well-
doing an interview with me.
Well, you know, there are so many things I'd love to follow up on, but I think one of the things that really struck me is from my time in Wisconsin, as you folks were talking, we had some of the same issues that we dealt with, the silos within radio and television, and the work that Byron did to try to break those down. And I was the radio guy, and maybe I wasn't quite as cooperative in the beginning as I could have been, but that was certainly something that rang true. You know, that I remember as you were talking, the dedicated person within the university when we would have something controversial on the air who would call me and dance around. You know, that program you had on, you know, do you really need to do that? That kind of thing. You know, I dealt with that, so that kind of rang true. And then the thing about the you know, the golden years, one of the things that struck me is that university leadership really could make a difference at the top level. When I went to Madison, Donald Shalala was the chancellor. Ron Bornstein, Ted, you know, was running the basically the university on a day-to-day basis, and the support that we ended up getting in that era that evaporated. So when your support evaporated, well, the same thing happened at the University of Wisconsin as well. And so I found some of those themes to be very similar to some of the things that I went through. And I guess I would want to ask Ted, just, you know, kind of one question. Did they ever tell you not to air something? Did they go that far? Because they didn't go that far with me, but it was close.
No, I think what it led to was a more antagonistic relationship that became untenable for me. So it wasn't as specific, you know, it was very kind of a roundabout and you know, I think some of it is just it became, and when I first got there with the original outreach guy, I mean, public broadcasting was a separate entity. And I think as the second, I'm not using his name, just it's recorded, but it became this whole concept of one outreach, which was just a bizarre. I mean, it was like our whole purpose is to support the main moneymaker, which was the distance ed World Campus. And then it became increasingly just financial and that you should all be working together as one, which I didn't particularly have any interest in. I mean, I didn't mind supporting things and doing work for World Campus and stuff, but it was this idea about it. If you're not if you're not using the same language, almost, you're not, you know, there's a problem. So that was really the culture just became increasingly, I don't want to personalize it, but it just felt hostile. I mean, walking into meetings and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's your question. No, nothing would ever have been that direct.
No, no, would have been outside the culture to
Yeah.
have it be that
Yeah.
direct.
Yeah.
It would, on some level, it would have been better if they had on some days. Because at least you knew where it was coming from at that point. So,
But Susan, you didn't work for Ted, did you? Or did
No,
you?
I
You
did
maintained
not.
your academic?
No, at that point, I think I was the acting head of a program, having been a named professor in the Department of English and Women's Studies. And so, you know, you could say I was autonomous, except of course I wasn't, because I couldn't do anything except because I had a dean sitting on top of me, and that dean and the other dean in engineering basically got together and closed the program that I was working devotedly on. Faculty have a really funny attitude. We don't think anybody is our boss. You know, it's quite naive, but I think that's the way we feel about it. We're our own boss and no one's going to tell us what to do. We found out that actually it doesn't work that way in the university anymore, but
Oh, it never did. you know?
Well, it used to more, I think.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, but.
one of the
but-
reasons I spent 20, 25, almost 25 years teaching,
Mhm.
but I was making more money in 1 month than I was making as a chairman. And
You mean
then,
making more money outside of the university teaching? Yeah. Well, that's the luxury being an English professor. You
Mhm.
never have to worry about those issues, you know? Money is definitely not on the table. Whatever you could do, you can't consult and make money. So
Yes.
you learn to live without it. And
Yeah.
there are those other great perks. You get really interesting people, you get vacations all over the world, you can do your research wherever. Yeah.
Okay, so, but Melanie, if I'm getting it right, yeah, I'm terrible with names. But you worked for Ted.
I did
And he
for
brought you in.
9 years.
Wow.
So how long were you there, Ted? 9 years?
I
I
was
think
there
it
for
was
9. He was there for more.
11 or 12. I
Mhm.
think I keep thinking it's less, but my Pat
You
keeps
want
telling
it to be
me
less.
more. It might have been
Do you remember
11
what year you came?
about 2000.
You came in 2000 because you were new when we moved back here in January of
We
2000.
had the whole
Uh,
Y2K
and then-
was the big
And then
Yeah.
crisis.
when did
Oh,
you
yeah.
leave, Ted?
Yes.
Mhm.
When did you leave, Ted?
I think it's like 2012 because I had an interim year where I worked for
13.
PBL. We should talk about it under the CPB one, but that was one of actually a real highlight for me because I was working freelance and doing this great project, looking at public media across the country.
Mhm.
But that I had that project for a year and then went out of that project to CPB
You and I both left in 2013,
2013.
Oh,
Okay.
boy.
and within like 6 weeks of
Thank
each.
you.
Mhm.
Um,
And so, but
Are you interested in timelines?
well, yes, I have to figure those out, for
Well,
myself, actually.
I'll send the big projects, the public service media projects. I have the money that we raised for each of them and the primary partners. And do you want me to
Oh, yeah,
send?
yeah, please, we'll figure out a place to put it.
Yeah, because it was Ted. It was over $1 million for liquid assets and a $500,000 for telling Amy's story, and another over half for geospatial. And
Yeah, if you can copy me on that too, that helps. Anything, any of you, and I know Susan destroyed her files.
Nothing. It's terrible. Unless they're downstairs when we unpack the house,
yeah,
maybe.
I'm looking at my LinkedIn. That's where I'm.
Oh,
I have it on my LinkedIn. So
I was trying to find the essay that Nate referred to because I wrote that as part of, it was a Jim Pagliarini led study on public media. And
oh,
he was asking for your vision of the future.
God.
And it was just feeling kind of,
I remember reading that.
Yeah,
I'd
it was
love to see it, Ted, if you find it.
it's
I
not
would love
quite
to
as,
see.
it's not as detailed as I think Nathan might have implied, but it's slightly dystopian view of the world and the role of a university licensee in that dystopia.
Ooh.
Yes, yes, but each, as Greg has pointed out there, each state system, each station and state system especially, each are the same and they each are different. But a university licensee's got a really,
Mhm.
it's a mishmash, it's academic freedom, et cetera,
Mhm.
but except it isn't.
Mhm.
One of the things I think I came to feel pretty strongly is that if you were a university licensee and you had a large market, like Wisconsin Public Television, very large community base across the state of Wisconsin and even Madison. So it's got that. When I did fairly early on at Penn State, a kind of budget retreat where we just went through where does our money came from? What was pretty apparent fairly quickly is that Penn State was by far the primary source of our revenue.
Mm.
We like to pretend that membership mattered a lot and underwriting, But when you looked at it in comparison, it was Penn State, and not just the money they gave us, but also the earned income from doing the sports production and all of it.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, you say, well, that was good because we didn't have to worry about that stuff, although we had people who did worry about it a lot because they got paid to. But it also means that if you don't have that support, you're dead meat. So I think that's where the difference is of a university licensee that has that self-sufficiency beyond the university.
Mhm.
And I worry about WPSU now
Oh,
because,
tell me.
I mean, the university's pulling at least 25% of their budget.
Mhm.
And at least. So,
Yeah.
and they've already cut back on everything that we did.
Oh, yeah.
There are no people like me or in
Mm.
those ranks anymore. So
It's really
Yeah.
tough.
No, it's sad.
Yeah.
makes me sad.
Mhm.
But again, it also makes me really thrilled that I was able to be a part of something when I was a part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, man, yeah.
Oh, well, this has been great for me because there is a tendency to think about the bad things. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation because I remember we actually did some amazing stuff and we
You
had,
It
did.
sounds to me
Yeah.
as an outsider that you had your, what is it called, halcyon moment or something,
Yeah.
your little Camelot, whatever. But the idea was that each university, that I will tell you, I go back way before Ted with my relationship, given the company that I ran with my wife. The funniest story was they brought in Mark Ursling from Springfield to run the station, Ted. And when they did pledge went straight into the university's computer. And it was a big deal trying to get the daily tallies back and so forth. And we would go through all these things. And Mark Schmuckler was there at the time. That was the number 2. They moved Masterpiece Theater from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock because it got you could put a 9 o'clock show in. And that's something that Ted didn't know much about, given KBDI and so forth. They moved it, and 2 weeks later, the university president called up Mark Ursling and said, "You'll have to move it back. My wife does not like it at 10 o'clock." So and then, they would try to figure out things to do with locals. That our town thing that they developed, I guess is the word.
that was our most successful pledge. But I do remember in a similar vein when it was the last few years, we did a review of the programming on the radio side, just trying to say what's working here. And there was like this history of a folk show that was just dominated
God, yes.
weekends. I forget the actual time slot. And I like folk music, but this would be like kind of like listening to a kettle trying to come to a boil or something. But it was just it's so tedious at times. And so
What was it?
we don't want to cancel it, but we do want to like taper it down. And but they came out of the woodwork, all 3 of them. I mean, and one of them happened to be a neighbor to the then head of outreach. And so, it was just like we did it, but it was just enhanced whatever the ill will was that was already developing.
Yeah. Well, and then, Weather World.
Yeah,
There was
that one I regret a little bit when I think back on it. I'm not sure whether,
that was when I first was coming, because I first came over when Weather World was being transitioned. And I
Yeah.
know you were taking it on the chin then.
I was, and this was like I was influenced a lot by Tracy Fosberg at the time, and she was the head of production. It did take a lot of resources. It was a nightly weather program, and they are very good at weather at Penn State, and
Mhm.
It's called AccuWeather.
Yeah.
Well, that's where AccuWeather came from, and
That's right.
so
Mhm.
we cut that back or a limit. We went, and that was a heavy lift.
Yeah,
And actually, when I think back, I probably, if we could have figured out a way to do it more economically, it was something that a
yeah.
group of people, and the weather does change a lot in State College. So,
And even pre-noticing climate change, right? I mean, yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I'm
Well,
seeing if there's anything else that I have. The only other thing that, Ted, that I might want to bring up is beekeeping.
I have a T-shirt still.
Ah,
I am telling you, it is the only thing that Extension is making money on right now,
seriously,
is
beekeeping.
beekeeping.
Say a little bit about what the work you.
Beekeeping 101 was something that we decided to try to do with my project development team, where we worked with Extension, with the two experts in Extension, and he was really telegenic. He was great on camera, and we knew we had something with him, a young Extension agent. And that it won some awards. But when we started to develop it without Extension, we're working with this guy from Extension. Then we find out, well, he's really never talked to anybody about it because he was afraid they would shut him down. So then I find myself in the middle of, holy shit, like here is this College of Education or College of Ag saying, we don't know anything about this and we are not offering this. And I'm saying, oh, yes, you are. And it was a nightmare. And now to this day, Diane Espy still gets reports, the producer. She still gets reports and she forwards them to me. And they are making money. It's the only thing that that Extension makes money on online. They make money from it every day, every hour. And it makes me feel a little self-righteous.
Beekeeping 101.
No, I think Extension on one hand was like boring as shit, but on the other hand, it's amazing potential.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
When there
And
was a poultry science department and they had a really good guy heading the department, and then that caved in, went under. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Wow.
it was when you tried to partner, it's again, the golden years of partnering were when nobody really paid much attention. You know, you didn't have things like time tracking. You put in your hours, and you know, you didn't have every minute. You were not an attorney who was billing in 6-minute increments.
Yeah.
And at some point during the years that I was at public broadcasting, that's the university made that turn. For
Wow.
anyone who was or who was non-academic, had an appointment that was non-academic, we had to account for our time in such a way that it became
Yes.
impossible.
Oof.
So let me ask, is this, I maybe have oversimplified in my memory or my interpretation. So I always felt, even in the beginning times where, I mean, it was friendly enough, but I never looked to outreach for any kind of inspiration. And I generally did not think of the Penn State administration as a place to go for that kind of thought, even outside of outreach. But I did think that the colleges, on the academic side, was a gold mine. And then it was maybe humbled a little bit by dealing with certain deans,
Mhm.
stuff, but still that the real creative potential was on the ground with academics or be extension agents or whatever. Is that too simplistic, or does that make sense?
I think that's my sense. But you and I kind of see the world with a similar lens. So, yeah, you weren't going to get inspiration, certainly.
Well, I mean, Yeah, if you talk to a faculty member who is not an administrator, they would agree.
Right.
There's something about the administration that felt, and I don't know if it's true at other universities. I always said it, Penn State was a large university in a small town, that there's something about the small town mentality that seemed
Yes,
more,
Happy Valley, yeah.
um, so.
Yeah, but I think however bad it was, it is so much worse now.
It's now Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, that's
No
what I
longer
hear. It's-
No longer Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah. Alabama.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's, um,
And I live here. I was the one who looked at Ted and said, like, stop saying that about Pennsylvania when you called it Pennsylvania. And and then after a while I was like, okay, you might be right.
It is.
Yeah,
beautiful area. Beautiful country.
beautiful country. Beautiful.
Okay.
David, how are we doing? Are you okay? You happy?
I'm fine. I did what I would think this is incredibly valuable because I'm archiving things.
Great.
And in an archive, it's a resource. Just think of Ken Burns watching this. And the thing is, that's basically how he does it.
Not that shot.
I know, that's like,
Now he,
Lopan.
there, I think if you look back, if you can, across the hour, you'll see that there's going to be about 30 minutes right there, probably from the first third in when you guys really hit your groove on the period of, when it all came together. And that tends to be characteristic of some of these reminiscences and so forth. But I think, Ted is an unusual person, and he brings his own hubris with him. And certainly, as you found out in Pennsylvania, he did the same thing.
Hooper's.
Yeah, this was really helpful for me because I was able to take a lot of notes and have a lot of good background that when we get to the actual interview, Ted, that I have some things to follow up on.
Yeah, I actually think this is better than the interview we're going to do, but
It is.
Yeah, in many ways it is.
blacked out. Sorry, David.
Yeah, but the idea is the interview is fine. These are really great. We might do more of these. We're just trying to find formats to create, enough archive material and what to focus on. But I think people is still the issue. I mean, that's the way we want to do it.
Well,
Melanie, if you were to do this, how would you organize?
careful.
No, I mean,
Because Ted's thinking, she's gonna jump up and grab a flip chart.
oh dear.
I think that what you're trying to do, if I'm understanding it really, is by capturing kind of the history, but also capturing the individuals who lived through that historical period, who actually helped things to move faster or to help move things in a positive direction or a new direction. I think Ted's, I would be very disappointed if you hadn't started with Ted. Because I think that that's part of what we all felt like we were a part of. We were a part of something that we knew was special. And I feel very, I have a lot of gratitude that I was included in this. This was nice.
Right.
And it is nice to think about the good work that we did. And, and it was a while, it was 10 years ago.
It's crazy.
What about you, Susan?
I love reclaiming that part because 10 years to me tends to be just about the moment where my research interests shift, I do something else. So I've done something completely different for the last 10 years, and I'm about to shift out of that. So going back to this period, I really had put a lot of it behind me, except for staying in touch with Ted, of course. But so this is lovely, reclaiming it. And then also being able to see the threads that sort of in my own research career and in my life went into that, were there beforehand and have come out of it now. I mean, to just give you one example, when Nathan was going on about stories and how important stories are, the last 10 years of my life, I've been looking at works of graphic fiction, comics, narratives, telling people stories about medicine and illness and disability, long form works that are collaboratively created and that mix words and images. And, I see the links now to what was going on at WPSU. I see the interdisciplinarity and the multimodal aspect of it. And so, yeah, thank you. That's really lovely to be a part of it and see those connections. Yeah.
Right.
I should, yeah, and I really appreciate three of you. Nate's not here, but you can tell him when you see him. But it really did. I mean, you've allowed me to feel very good about, not that I should have had needed allowance, but it feels very good to hear things that we had done that was really, I feel good about, very good about. So I can
Yes,
feel
to
sad
capture
about
that
it.
whole mess on scene, to understand what it means, how you've changed people's lives, how you enriched them and so forth.
How they enriched me. This was really very much, I don't know whether it was luck or just something that we saw in each other about how we can work together, but there was a coalition there that was really magic when it was really working.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ted and
Thank you.
Greg and
Yeah,
Susan,
thanks very much for this.
Melanie
It's
and
fun.